Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Apex Build video. And today we're going to be covering McClaine. So McClaine, I kind of call him the Aqua Hobo, and this will be due to his talent. So other than the first part, which is when he's in water, he'll get a bunch of stats, which goes up to 25% at 6 stars. His AoE skills will apply the stream special effect to all affected blocks for 1 turn, and this goes up to 2 turns at 6 stars, which is where he really starts to shine. If you're not familiar with how Hobo or this hero works, basically what this means is that any tile that you would hit with your AoE skills, there doesn't need to be an enemy on it. As long as you affect that tile with your AoE, you will apply this stream special effect. And what does this stream do? When this unit and the enemy are on stream, the current terrain, get it? Current? Is regarded as water. When non-flyer or non-aquatic enemy units move here, they consume 1 additional mobility. So very similar to Hobolandia's terrain effect, but instead of blocking flyer units, now you're blocking infantry movement units. Otherwise, it's pretty much similar to Hobolandia's. So with the talent out of the way, it's quite straightforward. You get stats, and then you get the terrain effect for whatever AoE skills that you hit. So for his skills, I would say 90% of the time you will be bringing his 3 signature skills, and you might want to sub the AoE 2-cost skill for Shadow Raid if you want more single target uptime. As for the rest of his skills, you're generally not going to bring them because they just don't have users in PvP, and you have no real reason to be bringing McClaine in PvE. So what do his signature skills do? First up is his 1-cost skill, Riptide Component. It's a act again skill, where upon use you will apply the stream terrain effect to the current block and surrounding 2 blocks for 1 turn. So it specifies here it is only for 1 turn, regardless if you are 6 star or below. And upon use, the hero can act again and passing through allied stream terrain, there will be 2 chances to mitigate mobility reduction. After using this skill, any buffs on the hero do not lose their turn count. So this is a very fancy way of saying that it is a act again that allows you to move 2 blocks after that. Except for when there are terrain effects that have higher priority than stream. So stream is like it's the lowest priority, but most terrain effects are of the lowest priority. Some other terrain effects such as Rosalia's Sword or Caroline's 3C, they have higher priority and you cannot override them with lower priority effects. And if that is the case, you don't apply the stream effect to that particular tile and you cannot move in that direction. So it is an act again that allows you to move 2 blocks, but only if those blocks are converted into stream terrain effects. So yeah, basically that, but slightly more restrictive, but I don't think this will apply in like 99% of the games. So next up, his 2-cost AoE skill, Terrifying Wave. Physical damage AoE skill that attacks all enemies in 3 straight lines for 5 blocks, and it will deal 0.3 times AoE damage and has a 25% chance of freezing the target if they are in water. And this lasts 1 turn, the freeze. If this skill hits 3 or more enemy units, its cooldown is decreased by 3 turns, so it will be decreased to 2 turns. So very straightforward skill. Kind of similar to Hobolandia's 3C, except you don't push them and you have a chance to freeze. So yeah, this is very straightforward as well. Now on to his 3C, which actually has 3 parts to it. First part will be a passive effect. When taking deadly damage in water, or if you die, instead of dying, 50% of HP is restored. So it's basically indomitable, but you will restore 50%, but only applies if you are currently in water. Can only be triggered 1 time per battle for obvious reasons. Second part is a physical damage AoE skill, where you can target either yourself, or any water, depth or swamp terrain, or on any existing stream terrain effects if there are any. You deal a minuscule 0.1 times AoE damage to enemies within a 1 ring range of the block that you target, and then after you use that, your skill will be swapped into Swirling Whirlpool after you use it. And this Swirling Whirlpool is a single target attack that deals 1.4 times damage and it ignores guard. If the enemy is in water, crit chance will be increased by 20%, and after battle you will deal an additional fixed damage equal to 1 times of your attack to all enemies that are currently in water. And after you use this skill, you will swap back into the Lord of the Stream, which is the AoE skill. And then this skill is not affected by melee damage reduction, so if you want to melee them, you can. And I think the most important thing about this skill is that it literally has no cooldown. So sometimes when you have these kind of swapping skills, they are not very clear with the cooldown. Sometimes it's bound to the first skill, sometimes bound to the second skill. But this skill literally has no cooldown. You will indefinitely swap between the two skills as long as you use it. So yeah, his skills by themselves aren't that complicated, but what this does mean is that he has actually a lot of ways to apply his terrain effect. Unlike Hobo Landius, where if you really want to just zone the enemy without hitting anything, you blow his 3C, it's on cooldown for 5 turns, and your opponent can kinda just wait it out because it lasts for like 2 turns only. Whereas for McClaine, all 3 of his skills are capable of generating this stream terrain effect. So, of course, if you don't hit anything, the cooldown is pretty long, but between the Riptide component, where you can kind of use it defensively to generate the stream terrain, or you can use it to, reach further in. And then as for Lord of the Stream, because at 6 star his terrain lasts 2 turns, so between this skill, like you can just use it on yourself if it's a map that doesn't have water. Then later on you can use Riptide component and his 2C skill to increase your territory. Now for his class, he has 2 classes, one is aquatic and one is assassin. 99% of the time, if you don't know, just run aquatic. And as for his stones, you will run attack, HP and defense. And for his arena stones, I went double crit chance and crit damage because his assassin skill actually has 20% crit chance, so I decided to gamble on it a bit, even though he doesn't have the best base skill. So if you want to run reduced crit chance and crit damage, you can, but I figured a unit like McClaine, if you tank and attack, I feel like it wouldn't come down to whether it crit or not. And it's not like you need to anti-crit to survive things like sneak attack because your revive is 50% of your health. So I feel like that was not very important, and I'd rather try to gamble on getting slightly more damage out of him. So as for his assassin class, there's a specific build which I will cover in the equipment section later, but there is a certain use for it that I saw from the China forums, although I don't know too much about it. As for his soldiers, the main 2 you'll be considering are Glacier Elemental and Pirate Raiders. So why not Lizardman? Well, because Lizardmen are melee troops, and his assassin skill is a 2-range ignore guard. Obviously, because otherwise they wouldn't say this skill is not affected by melee damage reduction. So for that reason, you wouldn't want to constrain yourself into performing melee attacks. So Glacier is 2-range, Pirates are also 2-range. Glacier is the more of a damage troop. You can see here, while in water, attack increased by 40%. And the other thing about this troop is that it is a magic damage troop, so he's kind of a mixed attacker in a sense. This makes it better for him to target things that are normally just physically defensive, because most people, when they do arena or class stones, we just put defense. Almost no one runs magic defense on these, and if you bring Glacial, they will do quite a big portion of the damage as compared to McClaine to those targets. As for Pirate Raiders, they are a more defensive troop because you can see here, all damage taken by soldiers will be reduced by 30%, whereas you only get 20% attack when you're in water. So you can compare their base stats as well. Their base attack is the same, but you only get 20% from the Pirate Raiders. And the defense and HP are actually identical, only the MDef is higher on the Glacier Elementals. But 30% damage reduction, that's quite a lot. And after actively dealing damage to an enemy in water, steals 1 buff. Won't always be relevant on McClaine, but over the course of a game, or if it's on a water heavy map, this might apply when you just splash them with his 3C small AoE. As for other troops, you won't really consider because archers and assassins sucks when they are not on terrain. And McClaine is basically always in water due to his terrain effects, so you would kind of never consider these. I've seen people run cyborg on this before because cyborgs can actually attack with his ignore guard skill, but I feel like this troop you will only really consider if you are not running spirit boots, spoiler alert, because that will make it harder for him to position back onto water. And you know, if they're not in water, I guess cyborgs will be slightly tankier than the water troops, but I'm not sure how much of a difference it actually makes. I don't think it actually lets you tank much, like mages or range attacks, I guess. But I think mages will just cook him through cyborgs, so yeah, just stick to the water troops. As for his equipment, what you will see here is probably the standard set. Breeze Enchant, Ragnarok, Azure Legend, Flower, Boon Bonnet, and Spirit Boots. The special thing about this unit I would like to bring up is that, you know, this is my opinion, and I've asked some people for like build suggestions for McClaine from Global, and I think it makes sense for McClaine specifically to stack defense rather than HP. Like, you can look through my enchants. I basically only have 7% HP, which is on my helmet, and everything else is just stacking defense. Why is that? Because first thing, his talent scales with defense, and second, he is an aquatic unit which gains bonus defense when they are in water, both the hero and the troops, which means that defense is actually a very valuable stat on aquatic units. So Juggler and McClaine, you don't build defense on Archon of the Moon for obvious reasons, because you don't really need defense on that unit. That unit is a straight up attacker. Unlike McClaine, which is kind of like a utility unit that can perform attacks. So his base HP is also quite respectable already. You can see with just 7% HP, I'm able to hit 3.2k green. This is on 4 stats, and this will roughly translate to around 14 point something thousand in Apex in PvP modes, which is decent enough, I would say. Of course, you can switch some of the defense over to HP, but you know, I'm not gonna bring out a calculator and tell you what the actual difference between tanking and surviving hits between the two spreads. But I would recommend, if you can, if you have to choose between HP and defense, you should go for defense. Of course, if you can roll HP, defense, and attack, you know, by all means, go for it. As for alternative builds or alternative items, you know, other than the accessory, you know, there's nothing too fancy. It's always these options. Armor, Last Rite is the secondary option, because the reason why you run Azure on McClaine is because it comes with HP and defense right off the bat. And I feel like Last Rites might not really matter too much for McClaine, because sure, it gives you a better chance of tanking that initial hit when you're at full health. But, well, it also depends on what type of box you play, because if you're not playing a very tank push style, you are quite vulnerable to chip damage, such as from like random AoEs or Ragnarok, Twilight Stars, and you don't run fixed immunity on McClaine. So how much utility the Last Rite gives you is actually not very important, I think. And the nice thing about McClaine is you can tank hits when not full health just based off your sheer defense. So in that case, it's better to commit to the Azure Legend, having defense when you're above 50% health, while also having the bulk of 10% HP on the base stat. The helmet, you can run a Jot if you really want to bank on the stats, but I think having Flower Boon Bonnet on this unit is nice because he revives at 50% health, and I'm pretty sure it does trigger when you enter after you revive. And it just gives this very tanky unit somewhat of a survivability option when you're at low health. You might be able to 1v1 certain physical units in the endgame with it. As for the accessory, Spirit Boots' main purpose is so that he can reposition himself after using any of his AoE skills. So either you want to position forward, you want to position backward, or you simply just want to position yourself back into a water tower. So other options, you know, you can kind of just run anything because he's technically still a DPS. Overlord Badge would be kind of a middle ground for bulkiness and attack. Otherwise, you know, you can run Wing Shin Guard to go all in on defense with attack, or you can just run any generic attack accessory. And then on the right here, you will see the Assassin build, which is with Lucas Piercer and Judge Talisman. So from what I know, this build supposedly is able to kill Shrine Maiden units. And I think that is because of Glacial Elementals being magic damage. So with Assassin skills, McClaine will do physical damage to the Shrine Maidens, and then the Glacial Elementals will do magic damage to the hero, which bypasses the Shrine Maiden's effect of reducing 75% of physical damage taken by the hero. But I was thinking, why not just run Judge Talisman on Aquatic for similar effect? Which I think is actually possible, but the main thing about Assassin class is you run Locus Piercer, which gives you +1 range, and also more crit chance. I'm not sure how much the crit chance actually matters, considering that you're doing the mixed damage thing with Glacial Elemental. So take that with a pinch of salt, but don't be too surprised if you run into one of these builds and it just deletes your healer. As for Enchant, Breeze will be the most popular one because his mobility is, he's like the normal 3 range unit, 3 mobility unit, and it'll be kind of nice for him to be able to follow up your teammates' attacks. Clock is viable if you kind of want to gamble on refreshing his 2 cost skill when you hit like less than 3 targets, and it can kind of be game winning. You can just cover the entire map, cover top, cover bottom, no one can move. And then Full Moon would be a tank push option, just chilling behind your tank, you don't care for moving too forward, and you have plenty of time, so you don't really need the cooldown refresh of Clock, and you just want to all in on survivability and also a little bit of offensive power. So yeah, that will be the equipment for McClaine. Okay, so I'm gonna try to do a bit of a demo here, but this mode sucks for trying to explain things on the go because the time limit is so short. So I'm just gonna do my thing, and then we will talk about this in greater detail after this. So oops. First thing, well, I guess with this you can see the effect of Spirit Boots. So it's very easy for you to just AoE and move back onto your own terrain after that. So you do this. So there's a bunch of things that I want to showcase. So first off is this. Let's see. Where can I do this from? Okay. So, okay, I'm gonna come here and I'm going to... Is this a grassland? Yeah, it's a grassland. I'm gonna come here and I'm going to guard. I actually didn't try this particular thing before recording this, so I'm just gonna try this. Alastria, I'm going to move her onto a forest tile and I'm going to try to ignore guard on my McClaine. It does not work. So as long as you move onto a tile and do something, you lose the terrain effect, because it says here when this unit and the enemy, so any enemy units are standing on this water tile, then their current terrain is regarded as water. So it doesn't matter if you started from outside of the stream. If you walk into it, it will be considered water when you perform your attack, your action, anything. So as for friendly units, you will see here, friendly unit does not care, because you see I gain the 3C passive effects from hooking onto a terrain, a stream terrain, even though it's on a tree. So for allied units, this water tiles might as well not exist. For Hobo Landius, the friendly Hobo tiles will allow certain units to be able to hit and run, but for McClaine, his teammates basically do not acknowledge the existence of these stream tiles. So just to further illustrate the impact of this, you can see this Lucretia is currently on a forest tile, but she is able to attack from 5 blocks thanks to Scepter proccing. So this can work in 2 directions depending on how you look at it. So if they somehow find their way onto a terrain tile that is covered by stream and they just happen to want to perform a Scepter attack, they can. And just for a good measure, I'm going to do one last demonstration. We will see Lost Ham hooking onto a defensive terrain that is covered by stream, and the enemy Lost Ham does not get any of the 3C passive effects. So yeah, just a little bit more about stream effect that I want to showcase before we go and talk about it. So first thing off, this is a desert map which is pretty good for demoing this. So you can see right now my mobility, I can move 3 blocks, but I can only actually move 1 block on desert because it costs 2 movement to move across desert tiles for an aquatic unit. So I use Riptide component here. And you know, based on the skill, it is as it says. You get to move 2 blocks as long as those blocks are stream terrain. And just give me a sec. Just gonna do this. Suddenly you see that I cannot move upwards with my spirit boots, and I can only move 1 block with my spirit boots elsewhere. So what does this mean? So unlike something like Tidal Surge, this doesn't actually replace the terrain for McClaine. So it doesn't affect his mobility cost when moving across defensive terrain or desert. It only says that when he is on that terrain, he will be regarded as on water. So this will change when McClaine's exclusive comes out at some point in the future. I don't know when is it, but it will basically allow him to move through these tiles as if they were water terrain. So he can disregard the mobility penalty from defensive terrain and desert tiles. And the other thing that I want to showcase is, you'll realize Ledin over here has actually lost his Redeemer's effect. So this thing actually counts as a debuff in regards to Redeemer's effect, which is something that I learned very recently, and I feel like it's kind of unnecessary. Like, Redeemer is already, it has its problems, and like this is adding another additional problem to people who want to play Ledin. You can see here, as the auto move decides to move their Helena, Ledin gets his revive back. So the main thing we want to take away from that demonstration is that the McClaine stream tiles have a functionality of denying the enemy their defensive terrain. Of course, this can work against you in certain scenarios, like the Scepter as demonstrated just now, or you might allow the opponent Archon of the Moon to abuse that and, you know, get some nice water terrain for himself, even though he normally wouldn't be able to. But I think the main thing here is that it completely just deletes defensive terrain from the map. And those of you who are familiar with me, you know I'm a sucker for these kind of small things, totally not trying to compensate for something else. So on top of just not having the defensive utility of those tiles, there are certain things such as the flyer tech, where when they are on defensive terrain they take is it this one? No, this is, yeah, it is this one. Damage taken decreased by 20%, so you kind of take this away. So on maps that they have terrain in the center of the map, you basically deny this from them, and then they cannot do this stupid, you know, Cherry Angel just sit on terrain being fucking immortal. You can't do that anymore. And this makes Tile War kind of a interesting topic to think about going forward, because right now there aren't a lot of units that are capable of, you know, creating their own terrain. Mostly it's like Hilda's 2-cost skill, I suppose. Other than that, there's Helena, but Helena's not really that common nowadays. Who else makes their own terrain? Like, let me just take a quick look at my Apex box. No one here creates terrain. Grenier does, but Grenier is pretty uncommon. And he only creates 1 tile at a time. But he can at least make sure that he is not standing on water when he enters. But on the flip side, you can also deny Grenier his own terrain. So it's kind of it works both ways. Yeah, nowadays there's not that many terrain creators out there. Lewin is one, but Lewin's not really common either. Yeah. And if you just take a look at Apex maps, just do this. Plains of Strife, there's no terrain in the middle. Windy Outpost, there's a shit ton of terrain in the middle, and you can just deny an entire section of them with the 3x5 AoE. Cave of Sorrow, or I call it a boat map, it's just water in the middle. There's a bunch of defensive terrain, although it's not like City Wall, but there is a bunch of them in the middle. You can see pillar, there's 2 in the middle as well for sky map. Gemini bridge is probably one of the biggest one, because there's 4 4 towers in the middle, and also these trees, which you would usually want to do something like park an Oboro there for him to charge up, because it's a defensive terrain. But you actually can't do that on this map unless you can override your own terrain, because if you park your Oboro there, I'm just gonna use my 3C and I'm gonna piss on your carpet, and suddenly you're not on a tree anymore, and I can actually kill you with a lot of assassins. Winter Hideaway, there's water in the middle, Cavernolite, swamp in the middle, Broken Cliffs, towers in the middle. So in terms of contesting terrain, McClaine is actually pretty oppressive. Those that are kind of flat in the middle, they kind of have water there, so you're either denying defensive terrain or you're already in good shape because there's water there in the first place. So yeah, right now with the maps that we have, McClaine is actually quite annoying in contesting for territory, and defensive players won't be able to just rely on just sitting on defensive terrain if you give your opponent McClaine, because if they get their terrain effect on that defensive terrain, you just lose it. So yeah, I took a bit of time to talk about the stream effect, so because I think this is actually quite a, I don't know if people are gonna notice this kind of thing. And yeah, with that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you guys for watching. See you guys in the next one.